Ahoy, me hearties, and welcome back to The Workaround. I am Bob, your host. You are in good company with thousands of fellow entrepreneurs and innovators who read, listen, or watch my stories from a career in tech startups and corporate innovation. I'm sitting here to make you think, smile, and discover a shortcut to success or a trap to avoid. Here we go. This one is, I'll get into it. Recently I had a chance to join John Warrillow on his podcast, Built to Sell. I've been listening to this forever. This is kind of like, if there was one podcast I had to tell the story on, this is it. John reached out to me, in 2018, weeks after the announcement that we had sold, inviting me to come into the podcast. And I said, hey, I'm still on earnout here, and there's a lot of stuff I can't talk about. We both kind of let it drop off until just a few weeks ago. We got it back together, pulled it off, and it was a great, fun conversation, I think, for both of us. He's the best in the business at pulling stories from and success tips from sellers. I'll share links to that here and elsewhere for you to go check it out if you haven't. He also particularly loved a post that I wrote a few weeks ago called "What Are 8 Years of Your Life Worth?" I'll share a link to that one as well. That kind of got me started as thinking about what John and I would speak about. But I'll say what's really interesting is, it's been 5-something years before I finished, since I finished my earnout, my last company, but I still tune into John and his guests every week. Why? I just love the hero's journey of building and selling a business. It's fascinating. Each has its ups and downs, and I think the process of selling a business shapes you as a founder and owner, and sometimes the other members of the team as well that are with you. And it certainly did with me, and I think everybody that I've heard on John's show. Now, in preparing for his show, I wondered what I could bring to the table that would be different than the other 479 guests that he has spoken with, which was not an easy assignment. The bar was high. But one thing in the weeks leading up to it, what kept coming to me was many times in the stories that I'd heard of other founders on his podcast, many did not have a very good earnout experience. And not very good means they did not make much money, if any at all, on them. And I find that to be a real shame, because I've been on the other side, the lucky side, going 2 for 2 and selling my companies and maxing our earnouts. And I have to say, none of it was easy. Our teams got lucky as hell, as I said, but each time I hear of other struggles, I wish I had the chance to share my experience with them beforehand. So that's what I'm trying to do here in a special secret post and video that I'll tell you about too. So whether you hope to sell your company someday, or you're an employee at a company that goes through this, or you're just curious, come with me for a peek behind the curtain at an interesting, I think, underreported corner of the business world. So where I'm coming from. For background, and since I'll be alluding to these two experiences in my tips and stories below, here are the details of the companies that I've owned and sold. First was a digital agency called Bridge Worldwide. My roles there were partner, head of client success, strategy, and new business. Our summary of the businesses: it was a creative agency, creative advertising agency that was from Cincinnati, started around in the 1970s. My fellow executives and I joined as its founder and other co-owners had been evolving it into a leading digital agency. We had very large corporate customers. Our revenue was about $10 million at the date of acquisition, and our EBITDA was about a 20% rate. We had raised no money in this agency, so it was all our ownership. Why sell? Well, at the time, agency holding companies were behind in the digital revolution, and they needed to do M&A to retain their clients, as well as take advantage of the budget shift over to digital. So back then, valuations were soaring. We also, though, saw that there was only going to be so many gaps for these holding companies to fill. So on top of that, there would be, as I'll say, a long earnout, and we wanted to just go ahead and get that clock ticking so we could eventually do something else in our careers. Our buyer was WPP, the world's largest agency holding company at the time. We sold in 2005 and then completed our earnout over 5 years and then some extra change in 2011. The deal structure was $50 million about total potential price, but only 10% of that was paid up front. So about 90% was due at the end of 5 years based on a combination of both revenue and profit growth. The result of this one was we hit our maximum earnout goal 18 months early, despite getting zero business from our holding company or its sister agencies. I'd say our keys to success were a great culture and retaining clients as they added a zero to their digital marketing budgets over time. The second company was a social influencer platform called Ahology. I was the co-founder and eventual CEO of that company. We were a VC-backed startup launched in 2012. We eventually, through the ups and downs that startups do, we pivoted into being a tech-enabled service packaged as a media buy. And we focused on doing large brand and retail media campaigns in social influencer marketing. Our revenue was about $9 million run rate at the date of acquisition, and our EBITDA was also around 20%. In this case, we did raise money, several rounds over the year of a total of $10 million. Why sell? Well, once again, influencer marketing, like digital marketing before that, was growing quickly at an attractive valuation. And in addition, because we had raised money from investors, they needed to be paid out at some point. And so the timing seemed right. Everything was going well. That's often a time when you do want to sell. Our buyer in this case was a company called Quotient. They were a public company. They used to be known as coupons.com. That was kind of their claim to fame. They created the first kind of mass scale, secure digital couponing platform for packaged goods companies based in Silicon Valley. So they did coupons, media, and some other data products. We sold in summer 2018, and we completed our earnout, got our checks a couple months into 2020. In this case, the deal and earnout structure was $50 million potential price. That number 50 keeps coming. This time, $20 million was paid upfront, and then we had an earnout of up to $30 million based on a revenue target over 19 months. The result on this one, thanks to having a really hot product, a killer team, and the parent company's 100-plus person sales force, we hit our maximum goal 3 months early. In fact, our revenue grew from $9 million to about $60 million in just 2 years under this new owner. Okay, that's the background. What are some of the what's and whys of earnouts? So an earnout is defined as a contractual provision stating that the seller of a business is to obtain future compensation if the business achieves certain financial goals. That's textbook definition there. Basically, you hit X number, you get Y dollar amount. Of course, and there's infinite ways to structure what X and Y look like based on both sides' needs and negotiation skills. And I'd say earnouts, there's a couple reasons that earnouts may be requested by the buyer or the seller, and I'll talk through those. First of all, the acquired business is unstable. I couldn't find a better word than unstable. Basically, when you're buying a business, there's a big fear, and that's that the investment goes to nothing or misses the projections. And many things can go wrong after a deal is done. Big clients leave, staff departs, the economy craters, competitors win, or innovation disrupts. We've seen all those. So an earnout is used to help mitigate those risks. Generally, the less stable the business, the more any payment will rely on a larger, longer earnout period. This is one of the main reasons that service business acquisitions usually have earnouts, while software businesses don't. And that's really because clients of a service business can fire you at any time. Those of a software business are locked into longer contracts and often have integrated technology, so it's a lot stickier. The second big reason for earnouts is if this is usually where the seller finds it interesting or useful, and that's that growth is variable. And What that means is when a buyer is offering a price to a seller, typically what they'll do is they look at some benchmarks that are in the industry. And that's almost always financial. So like a service business, the going rate might be 10 times its profit or EBITDA. A software company, again, for some of the reasons that I just said, it's more stable. A software company might be priced at a going rate of 7 times its revenue, for example. Now, these going rates, it's a mixture of what public companies in these industries are trading at and just the general gut feeling of the people buying and selling companies. But, so that stability is good. It's a good anchor, or at least a starting point for discussions. But if you have a fast growing business, you don't want to be priced on the revenue or profit that you are experiencing today. So an earnout is a great way for both the seller and buyer to share the risk and the upside that there'll be a bigger number next year and the year after that. And I'll share my example on that one too. And the third big reason is just industry standard. Some things go into contracts because they're custom, tradition, or a habit of the marketplace. The "we've always done it that way" is a very powerful force in human behavior, as we all know. And so you'll especially hear things like it's an industry standard when you're a noob to the process, or the seller has many more negotiations under their belt. But remember, you do not have to take anything standard. Just because they say this is industry standard doesn't mean you have to go in for it. And I've got, on Substack, I've got a link to an incredible post by Fred Wilson, the VC, who talks about this, that there's no real industry standard. But anyway, now back to earnouts. Note that an earn out means what it says. And that means you've got to build this business. That's much different than you may have heard of rest and vest, where you might have an employment agreement or some period of time where they just want you to kind of be a warm body, helping with the transition. But you're going to get your payment no matter what happens during that rest and vest period. In those cases, so you're fine. You just have to make sure you don't do unethical or illegal things that could get you fired with cause. And I'll tell a story about that too. But so for everyone else, we're earning it out. We got a lot of work to do. A clock is counting down, and there's a big pile of money sitting there if you hit your targets before that clock expires. I like to think of it, it's like a reality game show without cameras filming and much more than 60 minutes. But if there was filming, you might see some good ratings for that, I predict. There's a lot of interesting stories that happen. So that's the background. Now, 5 things sellers, founders, owners, the entrepreneurs should know when going into negotiations about an earnout. All right. First one, look for a strategic fit. And this is really the first, backing up a little bit, the first rule in negotiating a positive exit for your company is reminding yourself continuously that you don't have to sell. This assumes, of course, that you don't really have to sell. There's exceptions to every rule, and maybe you're in a situation where you really got to sell. If so, we'll talk later. If you really don't have to sell, that mentality and reminding yourself gives you the mental flexibility to look out to the future and make an educated guess on how likely it will be that you'll hit an earnout number as part of this acquirer. You're hoping for the best, you're planning for the worst, but it helps either way if you are formulating a strategy around how your business fits with theirs, what it does for you to hit that number. My easier example of the two I've been involved with was when we were selling our influencer agency, Ahology. In this case, we had built relationships with other large companies in the CPG and retail ecosystem that sold multiple products to their clients, but they lacked their own influencer solution. We had a very small sales team that was growing quickly with these same clients, and our team was winning 50% of the opportunities that they created. This is an incredible number. We had a hot product. So strategically, it was very clear that if we sold to one of those companies that had a bunch of relationships and had a big sales force, our product would scale very quickly and we would do well on any earnout. In this case, our offer from Quotient included 2 key points that added to our confidence. First, the target revenue growth rate that they suggested was roughly about the same as we predicted we would hit without their team's help. So that was good. Second, about 18 months earlier, that company had acquired another product, and they proved that they could scale and maxed that team's earnout already. So this was kind of a strategic no-brainer for us. Made us very confident. The other story was Bridge, our digital agency. This was similarly growing very quickly, but we didn't have a strategic need for growth from a parent company. It wasn't, agency work is really not about having a slick sales team. For us, the story was really about retention. And this is one of the biggest keys to success in any kind of creative agency is just keep your clients and you'll be great. If you keep your clients in an industry that's growing or in a media that's growing, like digital was back then, you're going to do very well. And so in our case, our large enterprise clients made us their digital agency of record. So any work involving ones and zeros went to us. Early on, the story was really interesting. We would have a client like Pepto-Bismol, big national brand, pretty big budget, but they might spend $30,000 a year with us, often calling us 3 weeks before the fiscal year ended and dumping that large sum into a website update. But the winds of change were shifting to digital. And so one year it's $30,000, the next year it was $300,000. The next year it was $3 million they were spending with us. So we just needed to hold on tight and not let the bigger, sexier New York, LA, San Francisco, London-based agency steal our lunch money and convince our clients that we were too small for them. And so we developed an overall agency strategy we called Productive Paranoia. And I've got a link in Substack, I'll put it here too, about that, a post where I talked about that. Like really being afraid you're going to lose your business is a great strategy, and it worked for us. And as part of that strategy, it made us think, hey, if we're worried that the big guys are going to beat us, let's join them. And so aside from the nice price that we got, being a part of a giant holding company, we knew would give our clients the confidence that our little Midwest team was the real deal. It also gave us a lot of insights and relationships among the power players, even if we learned later that they didn't know what they were doing. Another post I'll share in the notes too. So we hoped that being digital experts in the big holding company would bring us some extra business as well. There was a lot of that idea. We were promised that they would bring other clients or loop us into their work, but we didn't need the sister agency help to hit our goals. That was a very good thing because within the first week, the CEO of the subgroup we folded into screwed up his client communication, and we were suddenly pushed out into the holding company's version of the land of misfit toys. So, set your strategy before you negotiate. Second big point, it's around negotiating with the future. So, as I mentioned earlier, alluded to, earnouts can be a great tool for setting a price today when tomorrow's value could be much higher. That's what I told my corp dev counterpart, Sonny, who's now a good friend of mine, when he came to me at Quotient, when he was working at Quotient, with an initial offer to buy our company for $19 million in 2018. So, how do we get from $19 million to $50 million a few days later? Was he lowballing? Yes, and we made a great case for growth. So his original offer of $19 million might have made sense for our $9 million business back then that it was when we had these discussions. But our revenue had been $5 million the previous year and $2.5 million the year before that. So we had been doubling our business. We had a win on our hands, and we knew how to keep going just by expanding our sales team. So back when Sonny mentioned 19 million, I just smiled and said, hey, I got another idea. We got two options. You can come here a year from now and you're going to write a much bigger check because I'm going to have a much bigger business. Or we can figure out some kind of earnout and share in the risk and upside together. So he got my point, went back to his team and returned soon later with an earnout structure that allowed us to do that and gave his company security in case we came up short. So you can do this too. Again, you just got to make sure you're confident that the good times will continue. All right, number 3, you've built a successful business and you and your acquirer are banking on the good times to keep rolling. But what happens when you sign the deal and leaders from the new company start trying to pull the levers that you control? Well, that often risks screwing up a good thing. Language around control, it's a huge part of any acquisition contract with an earnout, and it's worth digging into the details here. All right, so retaining control, what that does for you is it not only prevents your buyer from screwing things up, but it also keeps your team focused on delivering the earnout. You don't want them distracted with worry and change around new bosses, reporting structures, or the countless bureaucratic rules that your big company buyer probably will have. Nothing is better than you being able to tell your team, hey, everything's business as usual. But you must keep your promise and defend them. And that gets to the biggest downside, which is it can rub your new business partners the wrong way when you're doing this. I've had my shares of dust-ups with CEOs who didn't like me pushing back on proposals and with internal bureaucrats that were eager to carve up my team like a Thanksgiving turkey just so they could add boxes to their org charts. But here's a line you can use, make it your own, but I've used this a couple times to brush them back when that happens. You could say, hey, I see the rationale for your suggestion, and it could work, but I'm worried about the risks. Look, you guys bought us because we built a model that's working well. While we're under the earnout, I've got a responsibility to my shareholders and employees, and I can't accept this risk. All right. So you're going to have moments where it's easier to give in. You want to be the nice guy. You want to fit in. You want to avoid conflict. Fuck that. You owe it to your team, your investors, and yourself to hold the line if the change they desire will risk your earnout. You got to know that you might even burn a bridge that leads to your unceremonious termination once the earnout is done, which I've had that happen to me. It was great. Don't let it bother you. They don't deserve your talents if they don't appreciate your perspective in these kinds of situations. It's just business. That's how it works. All right. Number 4, watch the caps and the floors. This is one where I went 0 for 2 in my earnouts, but at least in the good way of going 0 for 2. I'll explain. So you're negotiating the financial goals and the resulting payouts. You'll often have something like a sliding scale. In my last company, for example, we agreed on a revenue goal of around $25 million, which would then unlock a targeted earnout payment of $20 million. So the slider was something like this. Anything less than 70% of the goal, or $17.5 million, and we got 0. So this was the floor. We didn't want to go below there. But if we get to the floor, we make something. So if in this case, if we achieved between 70% and 99% of the goal, we received a corresponding share of the earnout. For example, if we hit 80% of the revenue goal, we would hit 80% of the earnout payment, or in this case, $16 million. If we reached the $25 million revenue goal, we would receive 100% out of the targeted earnout amount, which was $20 million. But to further incentivize us, there was an upside. So if we exceeded our goal, we got a corresponding share. For example, if we got 150% of the earnout goal, that would unlock 150% of the earnout payment, which was $30 million. So that's the cap. That's the most that they're going to pay you in any kind of earnout deal. My 2-time mistake was agreeing to a cap because we hit our max amount early in both companies. At our agency, we maxed out with a year and a half to go, leaving something like $13 million on the table if we had no cap at all. We probably would have even gotten more because we kind of hit cruise control with a year and a half to go. And as one of the wise men of Omaha said, show me the lack of incentives and I'll show you a lazy leadership team. At least that's my take on their words. But, I could see why a buyer would want to limit the amount it pays out, but this could backfire on both parties. And it's a win-win if there's no cap. So I've been hurt there a couple times. Maybe you can negotiate better than I did, or maybe I'll do better next time. All right, number 5, finally. I should have put this as number 1, so I hope you're still here. Share the wealth. I think you're going to see by now, earnouts involve a lot of money over a long period of time. You not only need to keep the business from crashing, but you've got to grow, sometimes aggressively. How do you do that? Well, you need your team. There's nothing more powerful than a uniting goal for your team. How do you do that? How do you think about it? My friend Eric, I bring his words up all the time. He's a guy who loves to throw around clever business phrases. Some of his classics include companies are bought, not sold. Another one is easy to buy, easy to sell. But the phrase of his that has paid off the most for me is pigs get fed, hogs get slaughtered. In other words, share the wealth with your team rather than hoarding it all for yourself. Sure, it's almost always the right and responsible thing to do, but even a heartless capitalist can see the value of locking in and incentivizing the team that does all the hard work. In my first company, we created a phantom equity pool for our senior team leaders. We cut them in for a long-term incentive just like we had. It was smart, but I wish we had made it even broader. I was able to fix that error in my second company. In that case, we negotiated a $3 million potential carve-out in the earnout, and every employee before the acquisition could earn about a year's salary if we hit our maximum number. And from that day forward, the team was completely focused on the prize. They took change in stride, came up with new ideas, built deep relationships within the new company, and kept smiles on their faces the whole time. Only one person left in those about 2 years, and that guy is still kicking himself for leaving money on the table. We had also created a special budget for goal-based events to motivate our team further and allow for the employees that were hired after the deal closed to participate. We threw one big party once we cleared our 70% floor, a bigger one when we hit our 100% goal, and then when we hit our 150% max, we flew everyone to Cancun for the weekend, which happened to be the last weekend before COVID shut everything down. So quite an amazing event there and story. The last beach anyone would see for a couple years. I have to say, seeing the money in the bank account, yes, that's cool. Everyone's got that. That's awesome. But sharing the journey and celebrating with your team is much cooler and much more memorable. In the end, there's happiness, freedom, and security in the financial outcomes of the earnouts, even though the years of getting to those checks are full of challenges. Through the good times and bad, I found it incredibly clarifying and motivating to see that number and know that you and your team are locked in on it together. Let's face it, we're in a business world that's defined by unpredictability and disruption, and a deal like that is as close as you can get to a sure thing. So, I hope you get to go for it someday too. If you need help getting there or a shoulder to cry on, please connect with me on LinkedIn or schedule a time on my calendar. I'll give the links here. And if you're still there, there's a secret bonus podcast, YouTube video that I'll be sharing. Look out here or go to Substack at the end of this post to find it. I'll get it to you. Had a lot of fun coming up with that one, and I've got lots of secret stuff that most people won't get unless they request. So thanks for being a part of this. Great to have you. Make sure that if you're listening to us on the podcast, also check this out on YouTube, vice versa. The worlds are blending of audio and video. Glad to have you. Thanks for joining, and ahoy for now.